Welcome back to the third installment of our series entitled The Thesis Evaluation Graph. And as the title suggests, what we're going to be doing here is evaluate the thesis. But not just that, we're going to use our evaluation method to actually better understand the thesis. Okay, so it's actually going to give us a conceptual apparatus to understand the thesis itself. Now, just by way of review, if you recall from last video, what we did was trying to understand or sort of illuminate what it is that the thesis does. And we came to conclude that the thesis actually plays a crucial role, right? It helps us understand the paper. And so in that respect, what we're going to be doing today is delve further into this thing we call the thesis. And the way we're going to do it is by saying the following. We will say that a thesis essentially consists of two dimensions. There's on the one hand the argument dimension, and on the other, the scope dimension. By argument, I'm saying this. Your thesis has got to be contestable. Just as the word contestable suggests, something can be contested. So what do I mean by that? Well, here, for instance, is an example. If I come to you and I say, well, the Japanese bullet train is the fastest train in the entire world, could you disprove that claim? Well, you could, right? All you would have to do is go around the world, clock the speeds of all the trains, come back, do the same for the Japanese bullet train. And if I'm correct, what should happen? Well, the Japanese bullet train should come in at the very top. If I'm wrong, well, it should be second, third, fifth, 10th. Hopefully not last, because, I hate to be that wrong. But nonetheless, the point being that theoretically, you can actually prove me wrong. And that is what we mean, that a thesis must be contestable. In theory, it must be possible for you to be wrong. Hence, here the definition. A reasonable person could disagree with the claim you're advancing. That is what we mean by the first dimension. We're going to go deeper into it. In fact, we're going to introduce a subcategory called the persuasive intent. But for now, it's enough for you to just focus on a thesis being contestable. Now, the second dimension is the scope. And here we're saying, well, is your thesis scale appropriate? Here we really are talking about the elements of your thesis, how complex your thesis is, and the number of pages you have available to prove all of those elements in your thesis. So for example, take this. Imagine I'm at the grocery store. I'm getting excited. I'm seeing all of these nice fruits and vegetables, and I go ahead and just buy and buy and buy. And I'm ready to go home and at the end realize I didn't even bring any bags. So now I'm stuck. So what am I going to do? Well, I pick up my phone, dial my number, and who do I call? I call you, my buddy. I'm stuck at the grocery store. I got all this stuff. Man, I need the bags, otherwise I can't get home. And you, of course, being the friend you are, what do? You come right away. You get there, I'm happy, you're happy that you can help me. I'm like, great, where are the bags? And then you pull out and you give me this. One tiny grocery bag. So you're bringing me this one little bag. Well, what am I supposed to do with this? I mean, you're my buddy. I really do appreciate that you've come all this way to help me out, but come on, one bag? One tiny bag? Well, there's a problem in scale here. The scale of the groceries do not fit the scale of the bags that's supposed to carry them. And it's that logic that we're going to speak about when we're saying your thesis to be scale appropriate. Therefore, when we're speaking about this, right, really our point is to say your thesis can be thoroughly proven in the length of your paper. And so for now, let's focus a little more on the scope dimension. And later on, we're going to go to the argument dimension. Now for the scope, we can really think of this in terms of a continuum, where on the left we have a narrow scope and on the right, broad scope. Things get broader, right? And rather than grocery bags, just to really make sure that we understand the underlying idea here, let's say that the scope here is time. So it means on the left, little time, on the right, a lot of time. So if I was to ask you, how long does it take you to make a peanut butter sandwich? Well, what would you say? 3 minutes? 4 minutes? If you really care about the peanut butter being spread equally across the entire slice, maybe 5. But by and large, it shouldn't take you much time. Now, if I were to ask you this about the burger, Well, then you would say, oh, that takes you a little more time. Well, we would see the same trend, right? The more elaborate the meal becomes, well, the more time you need. So for instance, if someone were to come to you, a friend of yours, who's super excited, saying that I'm going to make this feast for all of my friends, vegetables, meat, everything. I'm super excited. I'm going to make all of this. And you get excited with them. It's like, great, let me have some of this. It's like, yeah, I will. And you know what? I'm going to do it all in 3 minutes. Well, come on, man. No, that's not going to happen. If you're lucky, you might be able to get the plates on the table. And even that, I doubt. It's impossible. You cannot make all of this food in a matter of 3 minutes. It's like, I hate to break it to you, buddy. I like your effort, I'll give you an A for effort, but it's not going to happen. Instead, what you would need is much more time. In other words, your friend's proposal to make this feast in 3 minutes is illustrating that there is, a mismatch in scale, just like we saw with the grocery. Now, this is the key point, right? What we're saying here is the bag, or in our case here, the time, is equivalent to the number of pages that you have available in arguing and making a case for your thesis. That is, to provide the entire logic, evidence, and all of the supporting cases, everything you need in order to convince your audience of your thesis. Well, all of it you have to do within the number of pages you have available. So we can see on the left, for instance, a memo, short paper, 1 to 2 pages. Then we have a slightly longer paper. And it goes on and on and on until on the very right, we see a book. Here we have a lot of pages available. Why? Because presumably the thesis is going to be complex. It's going to have a lot of elements, just like the feast. And in order to do justice to it, well, we will need more pages. So intuitively speaking, that is what we mean with your thesis being scale appropriate. The complexity of your thesis matches the number of pages you have available. It can be proven. That's good. So now, let's move to the second dimension. That is the argument dimension. This is going to be slightly more elaborate. So here, we will have 3 different categories. But as the arrow indicates, what our goal is we want to make sure that we score at the very top. That is, we want to have our thesis to be contestable with a persuasive intent. That is where we're trying to go. Okay? But to fully make it clear the meaning of this dimension, let's start with the one at the very bottom. A thesis that is both vague and uncontestable. What would that look like? It would be a thesis like this. Learning can be helpful for a person sometimes. What do you think about this? Learning can be helpful for a person sometimes. What's the problem here? Well, there's several problems. First of all, what do we mean by learning? It's unclear. It can mean many things. School learning, street learning, job learning. Who knows what kind of learning we're talking about here? It's unclear. But what about this? Helpful. Just the same. Helpful in what way? I don't know. Again, unclear. We don't even know what this means. And then if the other stuff wasn't already unclear or vague enough, well, then we cap it all off with this term, sometimes. If things were ambivalent before, now they certainly are even more so. And so what we have here is really a thesis that cannot be falsified. It's impossible. No matter what you were to say to the author of that thesis, they could always switch it up. They could say, well, I didn't mean that by learning, or I didn't mean that by helpful. And also, by the way, I said sometimes. In other words, they are not making any commitment. And by not making a commitment, well, it cannot be falsified. This should remind you of something. It should remind you of something like this, a fortune teller, looking all intense, and then comes the claim.
Let me look into my crystal ball. Yes, the voices are speaking to me. I can see it. It is becoming clear. Yes, they are saying that you will die.
I'm gonna die? When? Tell me when. Do I need to call my parents now? My siblings? My friends? Should I say goodbye right now? I mean, tell me, when am I going to die?
Yes, the voices are speaking to me. These are the signs that you will die, eventually.
For real? Really? That's the game we're playing? Eventually? Notice, we come out with this strong statement, at least seems to be strong, but then when you say eventually, it essentially becomes meaningless. There's no commitment behind it. It can never be wrong. I mean, if that person were to come back when they're 150 years old, right, all old, and comes to it and is like, I've survived all these years, even though you said I'm going to die. Well, what's the fortune teller going to say?
My son, I said eventually.
Right? At no point can the fortune teller be proven wrong. Because we know we're all going to die eventually. That's just a statement of fact. And that is the problem that we have with a thesis that is vague and uncontestable. It can never be wrong. And actually, it even shows up when someone presents such a thesis. They struggle to put together a coherent argument just because they're unclear themselves what precisely they are arguing. So now we want to make an improvement here. How can we do that? Well, let's move up one level and propose this thesis. A college degree increases a person's lifetime earnings. Okay. Why is this one an improvement from the previous one? Well, for one, we have specified what we mean by learning. Right? Here we call it what? A college degree. So now we are beginning to commit to something. It's not just learning in general. We're saying more specifically a college degree. And we follow that up with what? Well, instead of saying helpful, we say, well, college degree increases a person's lifetime earnings. Now we are making a commitment. Now we're saying something specific. The college degree increases a person's lifetime earnings. And what does that do? Well, it makes this statement falsifiable. We can now see and say, well, is it possible, or is it the case that college degree actually increases a person's lifetime earnings? We can study that. We can prove it wrong, right? And as such, we see that in comparison to the previous thesis, our current thesis is a huge improvement. A huge improvement. And that's great. That is what we want. We want to make sure that we are moving up. Yet, as you can see, we're still in the middle. The problem is that it's largely descriptive. Now, this concept here is difficult. And the concept to sort of move up to the next stage is really one of persuasive intent. That is, the persuasive intent is unclear. And because it's a tricky concept, we're going to digress for a moment. Okay, we're going to focus on this thing called persuasive intent. Now, what is it? Well, persuasive intent, we are speaking about your audience. And what we're saying is that you're going to explicitly acknowledge the concerns of your audience. That is what you're doing. Now, the way you can think about this is as follows. Imagine here is your audience, and they're currently located in place A. And what you want is you want to take them to place B. You want your audience to move from A to B. That's literally what it means to persuade somebody, right? You held one position before, and then you persuade them to hold a new position. And so we want them to undertake this journey. But the problem is, there's a barrier here. And that barrier is the concern of your audience. There's some hesitation that your audience has, some questions, some skepticism. And it's important that you're able to address not all of the problems or all of the concerns, but at least one. And the way we can think through these concerns is to sort of think about the audience along these two ways right here. That is an audience that is on the fence and an audience that is skeptical. By on the fence, we're talking about an audience that is what? Well, they kind of see where you're taking them. They almost agree with what you're saying. They want to take the journey with you, but they have some minor reservations. The skeptical, on the other hand, is the one that is much more profoundly opposed to what you're saying. But the point being is that you have got to address, again, not all of the concerns, but at least one. And when you address their concern, then your audience is able to undertake the journey that you want them to take. Okay? So now let's think through this. Let's introduce our thesis that we just had. And here it is. A college degree increases a person's lifetime earnings. Notice right here, increases, right? That is essentially what we want our audience to accept. Right? We want our audience to accept the premise that college degree increases a person's lifetime earnings. That is our destination. That is where we want to take our audience. But the problem with this current formulation is that it does not address the audience concern. Right? And so let's try to think through this. What would be an audience concern that is on the fence? Okay? What would that be? Well, one concern would be what? I want to make money right away. Okay? I spent 12 years in high school. 12 years, hopefully not high school, but 12 years in school, right? And now finally finished, and I don't want to go to college. I want to make money right away. So now the question is, well, how are you in your thesis addressing that concern? Well, let's look at our current thesis. A college degree increases a person's lifetime earnings. And what do you see? Well, that thesis does not in any way address that concern. None. So what we have to do is reformulate it. And here's what we can write. Even though attending college means foregoing immediate income, the substantial increase in lifetime earnings more than makes up for it. What have we done here? Well, first of all, by saying the first part, even though attending college means foregoing immediate income, we are explicitly acknowledging our audience's concern. Right? We're acknowledging it. And then secondly, we say that the substantial increase in lifetime earnings more than makes up for it. So not only do we acknowledge the concern, but we are now proposing to have a solution to it. That we're going to convince them that despite the concern, the answer we're going to provide them will address it. Okay? They will still want to take the journey along with us to be. So that's great. So now we've broken down that barrier and our journey can start. Well, what about the skeptical audience? What would they say about college degree increasing lifetime earnings? Well, here's one criticism. And it would say, I don't want to be weighed down by student debt. All right? This is a heavy one. How are you going to address that? How are you going to incorporate it into your thesis? Well, as we can see here, our current thesis does not address it, so we have to reformulate it. And we can write it as this. While it is indeed costly to attend college, the resulting increase in lifetime earnings is sufficiently large to offset student debt. Let's see what we've done here. Right here we said, while it is indeed costly to attend college, well, we again acknowledge the audience concern. And then here, saying that lifetime earnings sufficiently large to offset student debt, we again propose a solution. And so here we're able to once again address our audience concern and take them to the destination we want to. Let's do one more from the skeptical crowd. So this will be another one. Plenty of people never went to college and they turned out just fine. Now, if that's the barrier, I'd like you to stop the video for a second and try for yourself. How would you reformulate the current thesis to be able to address this audience concern? So go ahead and stop the video and try for yourself. All right, I'm going to assume that you've given it a try. And here is my formulation. A college degree is a crucial factor in increasing a person's lifetime earnings. Well, what has happened here? Well, right here, by saying it's a crucial factor, what is it that we're saying? Well, the concern is what? When we say that plenty of people never went to college and they turned out just fine, what is it that we're saying? Well, a college degree is trivial to lifetime earnings, right? It's not that important. Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, all these people, they didn't finish college, and look, they're rich. So the statement on the left sort of implies that college degree is trivial to lifetime earnings. On the right, by saying it is a crucial factor, college degree, we are directly speaking to it. We are saying, no, there may be some exceptions here or there, but in our thesis or in our paper that's to follow, we're going to show that college degree is indeed a crucial factor. So that means when we look in general, when we see in the larger population, what we should find is college degree to sort of pop up over and over and over again, suggesting that indeed the college degree is a crucial factor for lifetime earnings. So in other words, in our thesis, we are sort of proving that it is not trivial, that it's exactly opposite. And so here we go. We've succeeded. We were able to get our audience from A to B, and the way we did it is by addressing our audience concern. And as I illustrated here, one way to sort of prod yourself to think through what your audience may say is to think along these two lines. That is, imagine what an audience that is on the fence would respond to your destination. Or what would be an audience that is skeptical, say, to your destination. So we want to think through that. And here we did it, right? So on the left, you can see all of these different concerns of the audience. And on the right, our current thesis formulation, you can see does not address any of these concerns at all. And so we changed those, and you can now see that they all are matching up, addressing an audience concern. And so here we have it. Here we've gone from a thesis that was largely descriptive, lacked persuasive intent, to now having a thesis that is both contestable and has a persuasive intent. So now here is something for you. You saw me earlier introduce the claim with the Japanese bullet train. So I want you to stop the video and for yourself try to formulate a thesis for each of these categories. One that is vague and uncontestable related to the Japanese bullet train, another that is contestable but descriptive, and lastly one that is contestable with a persuasive intent. So stop the video and try to come up with a thesis that would fit that. So go ahead. All right, so I'll assume that you've given it a try. And here's my formulation. So on the vague and uncontestable dimension, we have what? Trains can move. I guess. I hope they can move, right? But that's it. Trains can move. Notice, it's almost impossible to contest that statement. It's almost impossible for you to be wrong, right? In fact, someone may even say that if you're like, oh wait, look, there's a train that's not moving. They say what? Well, the earth is moving, so therefore the train is technically moving as well. Oh, okay, all right, right? Good for you. So in that respect, again, you can see it's difficult to prove this wrong. Now let's move up one. Contestable but descriptive. Well, the Japanese bullet trains are really fast. Now here we can actually begin proving it wrong, right? It's contestable. That is, if we have a measure of what fast is, right? Well, then we can have that measure and see, well, is it really fast or not, right? Good, but you can see it's largely descriptive. And so then to take it to the next level, it's what? Japanese bullet trains are the fastest trains in the world. Now we're talking to an audience. Now we're saying, for all of you who are saying that there are other trains faster than the Japanese bullet train, guess what? You're wrong. That's what we're saying. And they can prove us wrong. But notice, we are speaking to a specific audience. And so here it is then. Right? We have the three versions, and our goal is to move up. We want to have a thesis that is both contestable with a persuasive intent. Now that we have the argument dimension, what we can do is now combine it with the scope dimension. Now those two dimensions, what we can do with this is what we can place the thesis. If we were to think of the thesis as this blue circle, well, we can place the thesis within this two-dimensional space. Now, the first thing that we want to make sure is that for any thesis that you write, you want that thesis to land above that red line. In other words, we want that thesis to be contestable with a persuasive intent. Right? And then the second, and we will cover that at a later point in the next couple of videos, the next step is to now ask the question whether the thesis as we have it matches the number of pages that we have available. Notice, if we have a thesis that is not complex, well then we can actually do justice to it. We can prove all of the components in our thesis in a matter of 1 to 2 pages. If in contrast it is a thesis that is very complex, has many elements, well, then it has to be done in the context of a book or a research paper. Right? So the key thing here when we think about the thesis evaluation graph then, well, we want to think along these two dimensions. The first being the argument, that is, the thesis is contestable with a clear persuasive intent. And second, the scope, that is, the thesis is scale appropriate such that it can be proven within the length of your paper. And that is it. So in the next couple of videos, we're going to pick up on this. We're going to delve even deeper into the thesis. But for now, I really want you to think about the thesis along these two dimensions, the argument dimension and the scale dimension. We want to make sure that it fits. We want it to be located right in the space where it should be. So with that, thank you for listening. I'll see you next video.